All right, everybody. Welcome to the next session in Taste of the Infinite, Beth Lita's Introduction to Kabbalistic Theology. So far, we have been engaging with more abstract questions. We started with first the meta question of what even is mysticism? And if there is this thing called mysticism, what is a Jewish mysticism? Is it possible to have this religious mode, right, that we call mysticism, which is focused on the spirit, right, and focused on the unity amidst all things? How can we have that kind of religious sensibility with a religion like Judaism, which is so grounded in fundamental distinctions, permitted, forbidden, kosher, treif, et cetera, et cetera? And we found that there's a dialectic, right? There is a combined difference that occurs, this conjunction of opposites, namely that you can find the infinite by going into the finite. You can find the spiritual by entering into the physical. That is the promise, in a sense, of a Jewish mysticism, that you can find the divine within the particular, right, within boundaries, that you can go beyond boundaries, but only through boundaries. And then we went to another theoretical conversation in which we talked about God, right? And it is only possible to be theoretical about God insofar as we are not God, right? So what we're doing was we're trying to think about the way we think about God. And we did a lot of deconstructing of our theology in the first session of that, looking at the ways in which God is infinite and can't be confined by descriptions or categories or concepts. But then the second session of the focusing on God, or mystical theories of God, we actually looked at how God provides us ways of conceptualizing, ways of forming relationships. And those means of connecting are called sphirot, right? They're called the spheros, the emanations of God. But really what we found was that they are the different facets of God's personality, right? It is God entering into having a self. And that's what the spheros are. They are God's performance or manifestation of self. And just like we have an inner self that is infinite and secret and no one ever knows, but when we're in different conditions and different situations, different sides of ourself come out, so is it, lahavdil, with God, who is in God's purest sense, infinite, unknowable, beyond all knowledge. But when God enters into relationships, then different sides of God come out, different aspects of God's self. And that's different facets, different finite representations of an infinite God. Okay? Now we're going to deal with questions that are a little bit more practical, maybe a little bit more concrete. This session, we're going to talk about what does Kabbalah think about the Torah? The session that's missing from this series, which I regret not having designed, and that's in the next iteration of it, is what is the mitzvot? We'll kind of touch on that a little bit next session, but we're going to talk more about what does it mean to learn Torah from a Kabbalistic vantage point. And in the next session, as we end this mini series, we'll be looking at what is a mystical view of the human being, right? What is what's divine about the human and what is, as it were, human about the divine. So that's what we're going to be looking at next session. But today we're learning about Torah. We're looking at Torah, right? What's the Kabbalistic take on what the significance of Torah is? Because you cannot have any kind of Judaism without Torah at its center, as we will see in 2 seconds right now as we are about to share screen. Great. All right. Share. Groovy. Can everyone see that? Awesome. Okay. So there is a famous saying that shows up in all kinds of mystical, Jewish mystical literature, but especially found in the Tikkunei Zohar, the corrigenda to the Zohar, the kind of, at the back of the book where it has like the corrections to things. That's what Tikkunim are. But this is like a whole nother book of the Zohar, first released in the early 14th century. Seems like by the same writer as the Raya Mehemna, which is another text that you find edited within the Zohar. Very complicated stuff, the history of the Zohar as a book. But there's a saying, and it's a very short one. You see it all over mystical literature. It goes, Kud shabrichu Yisrael v'oraita chadhu. We have our own Trinity, as it were. God, Torah, and Israel are all one. All three of those elements are each expressions of the other. That when we say Israel, when we say Kadosh Baruch Hu, right, God, we say Torah, we're actually all referring to the same thing. Now, if you remember from the bonus class that Renee and I just released on Sunday, Monday, then you'll remember that the middle sphera of Tiferet is also referred to as Yisrael at times, and is also referred to as Kadosh Baruch Hu, and is associated with the written Torah. So now we do not mean in this that literally the people of Israel are God. But what we do mean in this is that in some way, when we talk about the concept of Israel, and when we talk about the concept of Torah, and when we talk about God, we are in some ways referring to the same thing. Now, it's a daring idea, but there is a conjunction, right? There is a pairing between all these things. They're all related. So, another way of thinking about this is that when we think about Torah, we are not just thinking about some book. We are not just thinking about some text that has its origins in a history, right? We're not thinking about an artifact or an object. We're actually thinking about an expression of the essence of what it means to be a Jew. Right? Torah is not just this thing, but Torah is the conduit between us as the Jewish people and God. It is the mediating force between us and God. And Torah, again, is not outside of us, but Torah is also inside of us. Just as we think that we have a spark of divinity inside us, right? Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the lamp of God is the soul of the human being, right? There's a spark of divinity inside of us, or we talked about the last couple of weeks that we were made in Tselem Elohim, we're made in the image of God. So there's some kind of conjunction, right? Some kind of connection between us and God. And that connection might very well be Torah. Torah is found inside of us, not just outside of us. There's a text that I sillily forgot to include in this. It's one of my favorite texts of all, one of my favorite teachings of all time. Now, in the Pirkei Avos, right, in the rabbinic ethical tract, it says, "Hafochba v'afochba dekulaba." It says, "Turn it over and turn it over, because all of it is inside of it." Now, it, of course, is Torah, of course. Now, when Ben Bogbog says, "Turn it over and turn it over, for everything's inside of it," what do you think he means? Like, what kind of relationship to Torah does that describe, or does that imply? That's a real question. Please chip in.
Youthful and engaging. It's not static.
Okay. It's not static. It's not just like a thing.
Right, yeah, it's a continuous relationship. Like, you don't just go through it once and then, okay, we're done with that. You know, it's something that you revisit, and yeah, it's an ongoing relationship.
Okay, it's not just, you're not just one and done. It's something that you keep on doing, but also use the word revisit, which I love, right? The book is, it ends, but you keep on going back to it. Right, just like, you know, when we finish reading the Torah, the first thing that we do on Simchas Torah is we start reading the Torah again, right? It's not a book that you finish; it's a book you live with. Shosh in the chat just said it sounds. She said, like, use the word messy, like you're looking in your room for something that you've lost. That's a very like clever way of putting it. But I think something I'm getting from what she wrote is that there is a sense of discovery in Torah. That there's something in there that's not apparent, and that it is only found when you look for it. It demands an active engagement. And I heard that before from Yitzchak as well. That's an active engagement. It's dynamic. It's not static or stayed. And that way, it also demands something of us. Torah isn't a thing. Torah is born from a relationship. right? Torah happens between us. And not only that, but according to this teaching, Torah happens between the three of us, right? Between the text, between us, and God. All three of those elements together, in a sense, make what Torah is. Actually, in a conversation with one of the attendees of the class after Shabbos, it was asked, like, when you say Torah, like, what do you mean? It sounds like you, like, every part of speech, you use it. Like, I'm like, yeah, the frummer you get, the more different ways of, different kinds of words Torah is. Torah is a noun, Torah is an adjective, right? Oh, good Torah Jew, right? Torah is a verb. But in a sense, like, Torah is this holistic thing, I think, from a traditional vantage point. And it's not just an object, it's not a book. Torah is the generation of knowledge around, or not even knowledge, but generation of thinking around what it is to have this kind of connection with God. All of these things are Torah. So the Mishnaic statement gets picked up by Avram Abulafia, a 13th century ecstatic Kabbalist that we've mentioned in passing. He was the original teacher of Yosef Chikatilia, in which he says, Hafochba v'fuchba dekula ba, right? He's quoting the Mishnah. He says, v'kulach ba v'kula bach. He says, it's all in you and you're all in it. Right? So fochba de kulaba. We still have this objective relationship. There's this book, you keep on looking at it, and eventually you'll find more stuff. That's what it seems like, right? But then Abulafia says, no, wait. Turn it over. It's all inside, and you are in it, and it is in you. So Torah isn't just this external or externalized corpus of knowledge. It is a kind of thinking that occurs in a relationship with it, because looking inside of you, there is Torah. And inside of it is you. Beautiful statement. Really gorgeous. Okay. So to sum up, even before we've even gotten into like the texts in the source sheet, we've already like touched on so much. That Torah in the Kabbalistic key, let's say, is a dynamic thing. It flows, it moves, it is alive. It is not just a historical text in which its meaning is located in the past. It is born of a dynamic and active relationship. Not just that, but it in some ways, like the Spheros, is a framework in which God is making God's self manifest in some way or another. Right? It's not just a book about what God thinks or about what God tells you to do. In some ways, it is a place, it is a locus, a space in which you can find God and yourself. You find yourself in Torah, you find Torah in yourself, and in that revisiting relationship, as was said by a number of people, it is an active engagement. Then you find in some ways the connection between all three of these nodes, all three of these elements. Okay, but that's in a sense like we're already at the end. We can just end the class right here. You already got it. You get it. But it's worth kind of building. It's good to start at the end and then you go back to the beginning and see how you can even get there. So let's start with Ramban. Ramban, again, 13th century Spanish Kabbalist, renowned for his commentary on the Torah, but also a number of theological essays and for being a Kabbalist. He did not write explicitly his Kabbalistic material because in his time period, before the Zohar was published and promulgated, it was much more common to keep your Kabbalah secret. You shared it with your disciples. You were part of the club. It was not something that you were publishing. The Zohar was a very daring book to have been released and published at that time because it was being, even though it is using a lot of language to talk around things. It's not a direct book, but still it's being much more blatant, much more flagrant in the way it's kind of discussing its esotericism. But Ramban has hints towards his Kabbalah in his Torah commentary. And he says, al derech emet, when he introduces something by saying by way of truth, that's when he's going to give you a gesture towards what he thinks a Kabbalistic interpretation of that Torah passage is. But before he even gets into the nitty-gritty, he has, like many writers, an introduction in which he lays out his theory of Torah. So let's look at that now. All So he says, Yesh biadenu Kabbalah shel emet. We have in our hands a tradition of truth. Now, here is the appearance of the word Kabbalah, right? It's been asked a few times, what exactly is Kabbalah? So Kabbalah in its original context meant literally a tradition, because the word lekabel means to receive, and the word tradition in Latin comes from traditio, which means to pass down. So Kabbalah originally, right, in its original rabbinic context, did not mean like woo-woo hippie Judaism. It meant the thing that is passed down to you, because that is what Kabbalah was then too. Kabbalah is a tradition that was passed down to you by a certain select group of teachers and inducted disciples, right? Kabbalah was a social phenomenon that was guarded because not everyone, as we talked about in the first session, was just allowed into it. And also he associates the word emes with it, truth, because this is a secret teaching that gives you insights that other more exoteric, right, more popular or more kind of external versions don't give you. All right, this is a secret teaching, and it's going to give you new insights that other places will not offer you. So he says, we have in our hands an authentic tradition that the whole Torah is made of names of the Holy Blessed One, that the words can be divided in a particular way. Pause. Now, who has seen a Torah scroll? Raise your hands. Use that reaction mechanism.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Tell me what's there in a Torah scroll and what's not.
It is beautiful. I got to tell you, like, here I am, a woman who grew up in an observant home, went to shul every Shabbat with my dad since the time I could walk. And I didn't get to see one up close till I was 60 years old. That's a feminist statement. But when I first saw it, I was like blown away, because the beautiful printing of the scribe and the, oh, what do you call it? Like the trop and everything all around it. It's just beautiful. You don't have any nikud, but you
Okay,
have the
good.
letters, and it's gorgeous.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful reflection. Second of all, you gave us a number of important facts. One, there's no vowels, right? There's no nikudim. Now in Hebrew, right, it is, I mean, if you look at this text, there's no vowels, right? Hebrew, the vowels are what's called diacritics. It's the dots and the lines above and below the letters. The consonants you see, the vowels you don't. And if once you become familiar enough with the language, you're able to kind of fill in the blanks. But imagine an English text in which every vowel was gone. Now you can read it, but you got to do a little bit of guesswork. Okay. Second of all, as you put it, you said, I think when you were talking about Torah, I think you probably meant the tagin, right? That in the special scribal font, right? There's kind of flowery additions to the letters. Those all actually end up having Kabbalistic significance, but we're not going to get into that. But what there is in a Torah scroll are letters, what they're consonants. What there aren't are vowels. And here's something very interesting. Were you aware that the original texts of like Hebrew texts did not have spaces? What they were was a constant stream of letters, probably to save space. But this means two things. One is the spaces you had to put in your head as well, just like you put in the vowels. But the second thing is, what you come to realize is that the vowels were a tradition, right? The rabbis who put the vowels into the Torah, who made the authentic, authoritative reading of the Torah, who made the words mean what they mean, because if a vowel is different, the word means something completely different now. It is a tradition. Those rabbis were called the Masoretes, and the tradition of the vowels is called the Masorah, which means literally tradition. The way we read the Torah is conventional, not natural. All we have is the letters, but not just the vowels are given to us by tradition, but the spaces too. Literally, the words of the Torah are traditional. The only thing we're given with the Torah in its original form, letters. That's it. Now, let's zoom back to Ramban. The whole Torah is made of names of God, and the words can be divided in a special way. So for him, Ramban says the Torah, he wants to bring it back to its original shape and say he wants to turn it into linguistic Play-Doh again. Because instead of just reading the Torah like we have in a Chumash, right, like we have in the book, Ramban wants to turn it back into, in a sense, a book of letters, a book of names. Shosh is asking in the chat, does that mean actually that the words can be written differently? Yes, kind of. Okay, let's take a pause on that for a second. Rashi and Ramban have a famous machlekes. They have a famous disagreement. Rashi says, Ein mukdam uchar b'Torah. Rashi says that there's no earlier or later in the Torah. Now, by that, what he means is sometimes events in the Torah appear out of order, and that helps solve a whole number of narratival issues that the Torah has. It seems like in some ways it's kind of jumping around. Ramban, though, Nachmanides says, how dare you? The order of the Torah is super important. To say that the Torah is out of order means it can't work as a book of letters anymore because the letters need to go in the right order. But if you keep the order, can you divide the words up in a new way? Now, this is what's called the difference between Kri and Ketiv. This is the difference between the way you read a Torah and the way the Torah is written. Okay, we are not, this theory is not saying you can rewrite a new Torah by having new letters, but it does mean that the Torah can mean new things by new ways of dividing it up into words. There's an incredible version of that you see in the next line. All right, but don't look at the text. Don't look at the screen. Just close your eyes and tell me, what are the first 3 words of the Torah?
Bereshit, Asa, Adonai, et Shemayim v'haaretz.
All right, very close. Bereshit bara
Slicha,
Elohim
nachon.
Shemayim v'haaretz. Okay, good. So in the beginning, right? God created the heavens and the earth, right? Classic. Maybe the most famous beginning in all of world literature. My grammar friends, what's the problem here? What's the problem? Deek Duke heads. Guys, mysticism is really just grammar. That's what we're getting from Ramban. You got to know grammar to do mysticism.
It sounds like the beginning created God.
How? Oh, I see. Bereshit bara Elohim. Okay, right. So the subject is the beginning, right? Bereshit did the creating of God. Now, dangerously heretical, Yitzchak. However, you could very well say that. Here's the issue, and I think actually you're implying this. Bereshit is what is called in grammar a construct genitive. For instance, you would not say, in referring to children, you would not call them b'nei. You would call them banim. When do you use the word b'nei? When you are attaching it to another noun. B'nei Yisrael. Right? B'nai Yisrael means children of Israel, Israelites. It is another way of saying Habanim shel Yisrael, the children of Israel. Bereshit is the same kind of word. You wouldn't say Bereshit without saying it's the beginning of something. Right? This is a lot of commentators spill tons of ink about this. And it's a famous problem in literally the first few words of the Torah. It is a grammatical problem. Ramban solves the problem by redividing the letters. Now, I wish this was all in one screen. I wish this was all rather like in one line. But look at this line right here, okay? Just look at the letters. Did Ramban change the order of the letters at all? Bereshit bara Elohim. Okay, good. Except now it is Birosh, Yitbara Elohim, which has a very, very different meaning. It is more grammatically correct because Birosh means in the beginning, like in the beginning, comma, God, da, 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 da. But now the verb is not transitive. It is not an active verb. Well, it is active. It is a reflexive verb. In the beginning, Elohim was created, or created themselves. That is what this means now. And he did it by moving the space over 2 letters. Now, how can we say that God created God's self? Because what is it that's being created as the process of creation is being described? Just rewind back to last session. What's being created is the God of religion. Ein Sof, which by its nature cannot appear in Torah because it cannot be named. Ein Sof can't have relationships with human beings, can't have relationships with creatures. So as God becomes a borei, as God manifests God's creative aspect, God's creative nature, what's being created at the same time as the world is the creator. Does that make sense? Only when you dance do you become a dancer. Only when you've made a pot do you become a potter. As the pot is created, so is the potter. As the world is created, so is the creator. Not in the sense that God, not one second, Lauren. Not in the sense that God is suddenly appearing out of nowhere, but rather the aspect of God that we call Elohim, right? The God that we can name, that is what is suddenly that is what's processionally coming into being. Yeah, Lauren.
Yeah, so my question would be, it's like, so in a way, is it saying that Hashem, who is Ein Sof, existed, but he kind of like made himself into a verb, like he was guarding to make himself into this the creator who created heaven, earth, yada yada? Or am I misunderstanding?
No, I think that's a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it. It is only when creation enters into reality that there can be a creator. Right? Before there's creation, the notion of creation doesn't exist yet. So God is, as it were, creating God's self as God. What is emerging is God's self as God. And that's what Ramban is able to do through moving the space, not by moving any of the letters. So what Ramban sees the Torah as is plastic. Not in the sense that you can change it willy-nilly, but rather it is a bunch of components put together that you can involve. Remember we were saying it demands a dynamic and active involvement, that you as reader create the Torah, just in a sense as God creates the creator. Right? The Torah becomes a spell book of sorts. Not just we already start to see the way in which for a mystical view of the Torah, it is not just a book saying things, but rather it is a book with power. In it is potential that can be activated in new kinds of ways. And let's look at what that means. Okay. So I saw a question about only certain learned people are able to do this. Yes. So, I mean, bracketed amongst all of this, again, was what we said before, was that Kabbalah, for the vast majority of its history, it was an esoteric, a secret tradition in which only certain people were let in. But we can talk about the 16th, 17th century as a time when Kabbalah was popularized, especially with the Hasidic movement, in which the gates were flung open and the well springs were bursting open, right? So yes, I mean, what we're learning about, I mean, and this is, again, like another pitch towards the next class. If anything, what we're looking at is, actually, we'll see this image in 2 seconds. We're seeing the absence more than the presence. Like, it is a hint of a hint of a hint of a hint of a hint is what we're touching on in this class. Every class should end with frustration and delight. That's my pedagogical goal. To feel like we did it means that I did it wrong. This has no end, I promise. Okay. So let's look at this gorgeous image that you might have heard of before. Nirasha Torah ktuva be'esh shechora al gabe esh levana. What is the Torah? It is the writing of black fire on white fire. All right, now let's go back to the image of the Torah scroll. When he says black fire on white fire, what's he referring to? Or my art heads, my art fans.
The positive and negative space.
Précisément, right? Exactly. He's talking about the positive and the negative space of Torah. The black letters, the black fire, is the Torah as it's manifest. It's the Torah that we have in our hands. It is literally the words that we can read. The white fire is the Torah is the Torah of the spaces, the Torah of the margins, the Torah in the space in between. If you have a comment, I really want to encourage you to say it out loud. I want to make sure. I don't know if I can keep on bopping back and forth to the chat, but can keep my.
I had a question.
Yeah, please.
Just a quick one. I just want to confirm that when you're saying Torah, you mean like the 5 books of the Chumash, the 5 big books, or do you mean all of it? Like, or like where does it stop? Where does it? I know where it begins, Bereshit, but where does it stop?
Okay, so that's a great question, and thanks for bringing our attention back to that. So when we say Torah, we mean a whole bunch of different things, and it depends on context. So there's the oral Torah, and there's the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah is the Tanakh, it's the Bible, right? It's all 24 books of it. And the Torah, when we say the Torah, we mean the 5 books of Moses, right? Bereshit through Devarim. And then there's the prophets and the extra writings afterwards. And then we have this notion of an oral Torah, right? All of the rabbinic teachings around the Torah. But there's also the kind of more generic or general notion of Torah, right? As a discourse, as a conversation, as a dynamic dialogue that we're involved in that includes every darn thing that has to do with this thing that we call Torah. So in this case, I think we're, in a sense, bouncing between these different notions of what Torah means in this, maybe even in the same sentence, right? Torah is, on one hand, this central canonical book. On the other hand, it is, as Ramban was saying, also the things yet to come. The negative space of Torah is also Torah, right? The stuff we can't read yet, the Torah that's yet to be revealed, the Torah of the absent space, right? That it's a mind-breaking idea. And Torah is also the way we read it, right? Because we were saying the Torah itself, its meaning is dependent on convention in some way or another. It's dependent on tradition, the vowels that are handed down to us, the spaces in the words, which are conventional as well. And I think Ramban is implying that opens up space for creativity in terms of what Torah can mean. What we are now seeing, I think, in Ramban is a difference between the object and what it does. Torah, the object, stays the same. It's the same letter, 600,000 letters. It's a traditional number, unclear how many letters are in the Torah. It's the same 600,000 letters in the same order. But Torah generates meaning infinitely. Just as important as the black letters are the white letters in between, the white space, the potential for meaning of what else Torah can be. That is part of the Kabbalistic revolution of Torah. It's not just a book. It's not, we're going to get further into that as we go along. Torah is maybe primarily the dynamic, right? As Yitzchak said from the very outset, the dynamos, right? Dynamos, power, the way it generates meaning infinitely. The most Jewish phrase that we see all over Midrash, all over the rabbinic take on Torah, is the phrase davar acher, another word, another take on this. Because to the rabbis, truth is not about locking it down into the correct reading. Torah is true because it means so much. Torah is infinite, not because it is an infinitely long text. Torah is infinite because it has infinite meanings. generates meaning infinitely. Torah as an engine of meaning. The dynamos. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And I don't want to take up too much time. So, I mean, I come from more of a Lithuanian tradition, but even in the Lithuanian
The Gaon of
tradition,
Vilna was a great Kabbalist.
okay. Let me put it this way, Nugget tradition, but Devar
This Nogdim were also Kabbalists. They just weren't.
Even in that tradition, there's still the feeling of constant learning, constant commentary, constant unraveling. I mean, every year you learn something new when you study a parsha. So what is different about how Kabbalah sees it than the not Kabbalah, Kabbalistic way of just, the way we learn Tanakh?
I think it's in its insistence that, in a sense, the real truth of Torah, again, isn't just in, let's say, comprehending what its apparent meaning is. But we're going to get into this. But I think looking at like Ramban's take that Torah is not a book, but is, in a sense, a dance of two fires. Right? It is a dance of black fire on white fire, and that it has a fungibility to it, right? It has a mutability to it in the way in which it involves a creative reconstruction of meaning, an activation of its meaning from potential. I think that is new.
Thanks.
Okay, so Ramban has a theory that the Torah is a cookbook of God's names. It is a sequence of God's names. And we find all of God's different names sequentially in the Torah. And because of that, then we are able to reconstruct its meaning by literally reconstructing the text in new ways, as he did, turning Bereshit bara Elokim into Barosh Yitbara Elokim. An incredible radical rereading. And I think in that rereading also showing us, again, the mutual co-emergence of the three elements we just saw from the outset. God, Torah, and Israel. We are all three united with each other. Israel makes the Torah in our reading it. God makes the Torah in revealing it. Torah makes God, in the sense that God becomes God only through entering into language, entering into names. Nameable God is the Torah. In that way, Torah, as we see then, is not unlike the Sfirot. Torah as a way of addressing God. Torah as a way of God entering into a name or names. Okay. Here we have our first real Zohar. This should be exciting. We have done 3 whole sessions of Kabbalah without really doing Zohar. And the reason is because Zohar is beyond. Zohar is perhaps a unique book. It really is a unique text, I think, in world literature. So we had to build up to it to get there. But we're here. We're doing it. Okay. So the Zohar, in its edited form at least, is like many Jewish books, edited as a commentary on the Torah, on the Chumash. But it is very loosely connected. It involves lots of digressions, lots of texts that have nothing to do with the Torah commentary, kind of woven within. So here we have an example of one of these fantasia, right? One of these flights of incredible fancy that the Zohar goes through. And here's what it says. I'm going to read it in the Aramaic because it's worth hearing, and just you can look at the English, and I'll translate it afterwards. Ihi ganiza ila yakira shemei mamish oraita kula satim vigalia biraza dishmei. Gimel dargin inun mitkashran da beda kuchabrichu Uraita v'Yisrael. V'chol chad darga al darga satim v'galia. Kadshabrichu darga al darga satim v'galia. Uraita hachinami satim v'galia. Yisrael hachinami darga al darga satim v'galia. There's a rhythm to it. There's a hypnotic quality to the Zohar's language. That's intentional. Part of the way the Zohar works, just like we're saying above about Torah, it's not just about object, it's about function. The Zohar entrances you in the way it reveals and conceals. It says something and doubles back on itself. It repeats itself again and again in slightly different ways, trying to get you both to attune yourself to it, but also to help you start to notice slight differences and changes. Okay? And we're going to see the way in which Zohar both reveals and conceals. It says one thing and then it immediately covers it back up. It immediately contradicts itself. And that's part of the point. Okay? And it's so many apostrophes in the Zohar too. It is exclaiming all the time. It is just so full of feeling and full of delight that it's just going to burst forth. That's the way it talks. All right, the Zohar is theoretically like a record of rabbis having mystical experiences and basically having these kind of mystical automatic speeches come out of them. Like they're full of the spirit, and they just start saying these mystical divrei Torah, right? And that's what the Zohar records. Rabbis having this joint experience through Torah, about Torah, in Torah, right? Torah is something alive for them, not just a book they're reading. It is a vibe that they're all on together. All right. This precious hidden treasure's name is the Torah, mamish. So already we have a new way of relating to Torah, because how is the Zohar describing Torah? A precious hidden treasure. Now that language, as with a lot of Zoharic language, is originally in the Midrash, but the Zohar takes Midrashic language and turns it all the way up to 11. Right? That's what the Zohar does. It takes received images from rabbinic literature and it makes it so much more intense, so much more magnificent. So what is Torah? Again, Torah is not just a book on your shelf. Torah is a precious hidden treasure. And already in that, what we have is two important ideas. One is that it is not obvious. The essence of Torah is hidden because it's precious. Where do you keep your birth certificate? You don't leave it out. You put it in a locked box. Where do you put, if you've inherited, let's say, from your grandmother, like the family heirlooms, you don't just leave them out for your kid to swallow. You put them in the bank. You keep them tucked away. How do you relate to something that is precious? You keep it safe. You keep it secret because it's just for you. It's something precious that was put in your care that you're taking care of. Torah is not just a book, it is a treasure. And already what that is implying is an affective relationship to Torah. It is something that you feel compelled by. It is something that you feel attached to, and something that you feel deeply concerned about. It is precious to you. Intimacy, as Yitzchak just said in the chat, is another aspect of that. The preciousness of it is something that is dear to you. Yakira means precious, and it literally means like worthy, like costly, expensive. But also Yakira, in this case, means something that is special to you. It is it is precious to you. It implies a relationship. All of the Torah is concealed and revealed in the secret of the name. Don't expect to, this is not descriptive literature, right? It is poetry, right? Zohar is poetry. Torah is both concealed and revealed in the secret of the name. So it is inheriting this idea from Ramban that the Torah is God's names. And in that way, it is both concealed and revealed. Now, what does he mean by it? What does the Zohar mean by that? If you remember all the way back to the first class, we said that God is only able to reveal God's self through concealing God's self. And the metaphor that we use to try to understand that is a personal metaphor, namely, that you're only able to manifest yourself in the world by not being totally true. When you are at your work, you are revealing yourself in a certain kind of way, but you're not revealing your deepest, darkest secrets to your boss. You're not revealing things that people don't need to know, because that is not what you're bringing into that space. To reveal yourself in some kind of way, you need to also conceal yourself. Any revelation is also in that way also a concealment. It's also hiding something. To bring something out is also to tuck something away. Because if you were, has anyone read Borges? There's a story he has about a guy named Funes, who has a catastrophic cranial injury. He gets hit in the head, and he can't forget anything anymore. And when he records his memories, they're nonsense. Because for you to reveal everything is chaos. The only way to make meaning is to select. That's what a narrative is. A narrative is, in Flaubert's terms, just as important as the string are the holes to make a net. If a net was made only of string, it could never catch the fish because the water couldn't pass through it. You need both string and holes to have coherence. So, Torah is both revealing itself and concealing itself. It is never fully manifesting itself openly and freely, but that means there's always something left to be discovered, right? Remember, all of this was already actually, all of these insights you actually already intuited in the beginning in the class. The Torah is never exhausted. It is always revealing itself and concealing. There's always more for it to show you because it is inexhaustible. Remember, finite revelations, the finite facets of an infinite object. Okay. And then we saw the most mature version of that teaching that we see in Tikkunei Zohar, but we see an earlier version show up here. There's 3 levels, 3 dargin, right? And dargin also refers to the spheros as well. It's, the Zohar never actually uses the word spheros. It usually uses the phrase darga, level, grade, shame, name, days. It never actually refers explicitly to the spheros. There are 3 dargin, 3 levels, 3 wavelengths, right, which are all connected one with another. God, Torah, and Israel, all 3 of us, inextricable. We all co-manifest. We all co-emerge. V'chol chad darga al darga satim v'galia. And each of these aspects, each of these wavelengths, right, God, Torah, and Israel, all of them are revealed and concealed. God, aspect by aspect, level by level, concealed and revealed. In other words, there are different levels of what it means to relate to Torah. Now, I think that's kind of clear to us, right? That when you start reading Torah, it means a certain kind of thing to you. But as you progress with it, then new things start to open itself up to you. Like everything, actually, like I think Yitzchak saying about intimacy, right? Or earlier what was being said about a relationship. The Torah reveals itself as you build a relationship with it. It is not something that just disgorges itself, but something that is built on a dialogue between you and it. Israel refers to both the concept of the people of Israel, I think the spiritual reality of the people of Israel, and also an aspect of God that is also called Israel. All of these things.
But not like the land itself, because
no, it is not, I would say, referring to the land of Israel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a good question, but no, it's not, it's not a land mysticism. It's a portable mysticism. So the most famous version of this level on level the Torah reveals and conceals itself is this notion that we have called pardes, right, which there are 4 dynamics of meaning that emerge from the Torah. There's pshat, remez, drush, and sod, which spell the word pardes, which means paradise, beautifully. Pshat is the sensus literalis. It's the literal meaning, the plain meaning. Remez is the hint, allegory, metaphor. Drush are midrashim and moral meaning, symbolic meaning. And then finally, sod. And sod is the spiritual meaning. It's the secret, mystical meaning of the Torah. It is the Torah as a map towards something more than just what it's saying. And I say, oh, fine, sure, that's the allegory, that's the symbols, right? Like Torah is giving us all this moral meaning. It's giving us these ways in which it's telling us something about how to exist as a human society. Yes, that's true. But we're asking, Lauren asked before, what does Kabbalah offer that other modes of relating to Torah doesn't? It is this intimacy between Torah and God and us. Torah is not just about us. It's not just about human history. Torah is about God's history as well. And not just God's history with us, but like we saw above with Bereshit, the creation of the world is also at the same time God's creation of God's self as God, right? As creator, as God in religion, the religious God. So the Torah too is not just our biography of the people of Israel. It's God's autobiography as well. God's becoming a self. Everything we see in the Torah is God's becoming a self. Now, if you remember back to the bonus episode, if you had a chance to see it, if you didn't, give it a click later. But the spheros, 7 of the 10 spheros come with associations with biblical characters, which means that if you then decode it the other way, when we read about about the biblical characters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we're not just reading now about people. We're reading about different aspects of God. The code always goes both ways. To say that these different aspects of God are related to these different aspects of people means the other way has to be true as well. Oraita hachinami sati megalia, Yisrael hachinami darga al darga, and sati megalia. God, Torah, and Israel, all of them reveal and conceal themselves as you build a relationship with them. The more close you get, the more is revealed in different and new kinds of ways. I think that's true to, again, if there's a book that you read every, let's say, besides the Torah, but let's say there's a certain time of year you're feeling lonely or something and you pick up Pride and Prejudice, right? And you read your way through Pride and Prejudice, and then every time you read it, there's something new about Mr. Darcy, right? There's something new about the book or whatever that shows itself to you. There's something new that comes to it as you build a deeper and more personal relationship to it. Alachas kama v'kama the Torah, right? In a way that totally, zooms off into an entirely different qualitative direction. But Torah reveals itself in new and more robust ways as you enter deeper and deeper into it. Right? The Torah as a treasure house full of secrets, a cavern of secrets. It's not just about figuring out what it means, because that is a category error when it comes to the Torah. Torah never stops meaning. It never stops meaning. Because if it is a reflection of God's essence, and God is infinitely meaningful and infinitely significant, then so too is Torah. And that, again, that robust, reflective relationship, that I think is particular to Kabbalah. Okay.
Josh, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So earlier you were talking about these facets of God, right? And then last week I kind of touched on it, but I wasn't too clear. So is the idea that God created like evil, is this another facet of God's self that God is revealing, or has it been made clear that this is something like a separate creation? Like that part just really confuses me. Does that make sense?
You mean like, is it something new that's coming into existence, or is it pre-existent in God? Is that what you're asking?
Not really. Is it like, okay, like let's go back to that artist kind of metaphor that you were using, right? You're a dancer when you dance, or you're a potter when you create pottery. So then God created this creation. So then this was the God of this creation. But then God reveals different facets, like different sides, which are all still one. So
Yeah.
is this evil force still part of the one, or was it meant to be just this opposing separate force? Is it the God of good and evil, or is it just the God of good and then evil is like separate?
Right.
Clearly,
Right.
I'm like super confused about that.
Yeah, it's a bit beside this topic, but I'll say briefly, right, that I think you're touching on a really motivating problem in theology, right? This is called theodicy. It's the way that we understand the meaning of evil in the world. We're stuck with a problem, right? On one hand, we have a monotheistic belief that God is the one God that is the source of all. And on the other hand, what we have is evil, which seems opposed to God. So how could it be that God creates and is the source of all, and yet there's this thing called evil, right? That seems like it is countervailing God. And there are different ways of dealing with that. But I think every single way, at least in Judaism, has to acknowledge that its source ultimately is in God, whether as a created separate force or as even a revelation of like some aspect within God that is very difficult to describe. But I want to make sure, actually, I want to make sure I don't keep y'all too long. And I want to especially get to this text. This text is a very, 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 very special one. And it is such a chap. I could just start with this, but I wanted to build us up to it. Okay. So this is a quote from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, also known as Rashbi. Rashbi is if you can call him, the main character of the Zohar. Right? He's the head of this rabbinic community of mystics who gather and learn and commune together in this way, right? Through Torah. There's a lot more to be said about kind of the narrative layer of Zohar, which we'll get to in the winter and the spring when we go deeper into what the Zohar is as a text. But here, again, we're focusing on themes. And this theme is, what does the Zohar think about Torah? So here, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai comes out swinging. He says, "Vai lahahu barnash ta'amar dahar oraita ata atal achza sipurin ba'alma umilin dehedyote." He says, woe to any barnash, woe to any son of human being who says that the Torah has merely come into the world to present stories and ordinary words. And the word for ordinary in Hebrew is actually the same as Greek for idiot, right? Idiot words, but idiot actually means simple originally. So what's he critiquing? What kind of perspective on Torah is Rashbi saying is deficient?
So I would say that it's the sort of childhood description that you give a kid when you say, when you describe the first story that you're going to tell your child about the Torah, you're going to make it as simple and easy to understand. God likes it when you do good things, just like we do, your parents, and God's not so cool when you do crappy things, or when you put yourself in danger.
Okay.
But as you get older, like, if you still think of God as a person who gets happy and angry based on your actions solely, I think You're doing yourself and your community a disservice.
Okay, so you're saying
grow
that
with
Rashbi is saying that there is a simplistic view of God and of Torah, and that you are, in a sense, reducing Torah to something much less than itself.
Yeah, definitely. At least at first. I mean, everybody does that when they learn the basics.
So I think you're right in noticing the pedagogical framing. Namely, when he uses the phrase milein de hedyote, he's saying that there is a, if you're all you're looking for, in a sense, is to figure out what it means, then you're missing that the Torah is more than just a book that has linguistic sense. There's something else much more powerful happening with it. But I want to actually get a little bit farther into it and says, woe to the person who thinks that Torah is just telling stories. But isn't it? Isn't the Torah comprised of the stories of the patriarchs and the matriarchs and the incipient people of Israel and the journey of the Israelites through the desert into Canaan? Isn't that what the Torah is? What else could the Torah be? Ah, of course, the Torah is a book of laws. Sure. So the Torah is stories and laws. Fine. That's what the Torah is. But then Rashbi comes and says, no. Woe to you, you idiot. Because the Torah is so much more than just that. How? How is the Torah more than that? That's the question we're left with.
I think in a way it kind of goes back full circle to the beginning. It's about like placing yourself in the text. So if you're reading Avraham talking to Hashem about Sodom and Gomorrah as a static historical event, and you're not somehow like placing yourself in the text or deducing something out that's applicable to yourself today, then it's just like you might as well reading a fantasy book or something. It's like so base level.
Yeah. Okay, so the Torah is not just about external stories happening to external people, but it's trying to, you're saying it's trying to teach you something, right? You're trying to make sure that it's forming connection. You're saying, right? All three of us are connected. So you have to find yourself in the text. Okay, great. You have to go beyond just the apparent meaning to get to what is truly significant about it. Let's see this incredible metaphor that Rashbi ends up using. He's saying, if that were the case, if Torah were just a literary text, then we would be able to make a much better Torah today. There's a certain quality, especially in the modern Orthodox world, which really try to justify the Torah by saying it's the greatest work of world literature ever made. The Torah is amazing. The literary qualities of the Torah are incredible. And Rashbi says, yeah, listen, the Torah is a good book, don't get me wrong. But if we were just writing a book based on being a good novel, we would have written a novel. Right? If the Torah was meant to be a novel, the Torah would have been a novel, but it's not. The Torah is full of problems, and it's the problems that generate the meaning. What's the classic question? Ma kasheh l'Rashi? What's Rashi's problem? Problems generate meaning. The Torah's amazingness is not found in its smoothness, but in its cracks. Right? To say the Torah is justified because of its literary quality would then say what really matters is literature, not Torah. Right? If that were the case, and Torah presents such ordinary words, and the leaders of the world have amidst them greater words, where Rashbi says, listen, go read the works of world literature. It's really good. But that's not the point of Torah. Torah isn't the next book on Oprah's reading list. Torah is something more than just being literature. It's not just about characters and plot and narrative and force and metaphor. Torah is something other than literature, something more than just literature. Rather, right? And I would say, I think you can push this and say the Torah is not just a law book either. If the Torah were just a compendium of laws, it's very poorly organized. But rather, there's something special about the Torah. Going back to Ramban, right? The Torah was written in a specific way to do a specific set of things, generating something special. Rather, the words of Torah are supernal words, supernal secrets. What's special about Torah? It's a secret. This is an esoteric theory of Torah. What's special about, let's say, Moby Dick is that it's an incredibly written book with all kinds of amazing literary qualities to it. And you could, if you spent 1,000 years or something reading Moby Dick, you could exhaust it of its meaning. Do not get mad at me, Herman Melville fans. But you could figure it all out. The Torah is inexhaustible because the point of it isn't to solve it. The point of it is to discover in it. And that never ends. Come and see, right? Which instead of like in the Gemara, you see come and hear, and in the Zohar, you see come and see. Come and see. There is an upper world and a lower world, measured the same. Israel above, Israel below and angels above. ... Let's skip a little bit. When angels descend below, they are garbed in garments of this world. If they were not so garbed in the garments of this world, then they could not exist in this world. And the world could not suffer them. And suffer, what it means is the world could not bear them. In other words, angels are spiritual creatures. Spiritual creatures belong in heaven. Spiritual creatures cannot exist on earth in their natural form. What do they need to do? They need to take on garments of this world. This is why in the Torah, angels are referred to as people. Right? You encounter a person in the field. 3 people are walking their way towards Abraham. Angels appear in the garments of this world. Now, this should already start to feel and sound a little bit similar to something we looked at last week. If this is true regarding angels, so is it with Torah, which created them and created worlds, which exist for her sake, all the more so. When Torah descends to this world, if it were not clothed in the garments of this world, the world couldn't bear it. What are Torah's garments then, according to this theory?
Words?
Words. What else?
Stories.
Stories. And?
There's a disguise so that a human being can tolerate it.
Yes, but what
And the laws.
Concretely?
And the laws.
And the laws. Good.
Well, okay.
The object of the Torah isn't the truth of the Torah. It is the advent for its manifestation. It is the way in which Torah can concretely come into this earth. If Torah were in its true form, it wouldn't be perceivable to us. The only way for us to be able to perceive Torah is if it appears like literature, if it appears like laws, like literature, like laws, but not reducible to them. Laws and literature are the vehicles for Torah, not its components. It's a radical reinterpretation of what Torah means. The way Torah appears is so it can be understood, but not so it can be reduced. We keep on hitting this dynamic again and again and again. Concealment is the way for revelation. Torah needs to conceal itself as a spiritual entity, spiritual object, and reveal itself then in the ways that we can perceive, we can understand. God, in God's infinity, cannot reveal God's infinity to us because that is not possible. God can only reveal God's self discreetly, finitely, through the Sphirot, so that God can be understood. Torah, in the way that we have Torah, exists only so we can understand it, in a sense. We create Torah just as much as Torah creates us. We come together, God, Torah, and Israel. A lot going on the chat right now. Torah is history. Torah is literature. Torah is laws. Torah is morality. Torah is philosophy. Torah is all of these things so that you can build a relationship with it and discover what's inside of it, so that you can go through those things to the other side. Torah, you would be arrested if you went out into the street without the garment. Torah needs its garments so it is receivable in the world. Right? So this image of the malbush, or the lavusha in the Zohar, is a classic Kabbalistic metaphor that is a beautifully resonant one, and one that I think we've already, in a sense, been building up to. It is the veil that allows you to see the light. Otherwise, you would be blinded by the sun. The stories and the laws and the history of the Torah, the way in which it means something to people, right? We read the Torah and it's like, oh, look at this literary skill. Oh, look at this insightful law, right? Look at this sweeping history of the people. These are the physical forms in which Torah manifests so that you can have an in on the Torah's true reality. So a story of the Torah is the Torah's garment. One who thinks that this garment is really Torah and not some other world, their soul should depart. He likes to really get up there. But the real question is, as David HaMelech says, Gal einai va'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes and show me the wonders from your Torah. What are we really asking for? We're asking to be able to see both the way the Torah appears, the way the Torah manifests, but also in a sense to be able to have that parallax view, that paradox view, to see what's not there through what's there, to see what's hidden by the garment, right? The garment lets you see the body. The garment of the Torah lets you see that there is something under it. That's what a garment does. It conceals what's under it, but shows you that there's something there. So that dynamic is what we mean when we say that concealment is the way for revelation. It covers what's beneath it, but shows you that something is. That is the way of Torah. So the Torah is a secret that we are let in on by being shown that there is a secret. We see the way in which it's hidden that invites us in, but level on level, aspect on aspect, wavelength on wavelength, we start to be able to perceive more and more. It lets us in. But key to that is that it's a dialogue and it's a dance. It's not that we make our way into it. It's that it lets us in. It opens the garment a little bit more. It shows us a little bit more each time. The Torah, not as a book, not as an object, but as a dance that lets you in further and further, building that relationship and finding more and more of yourself in it. Thank you for walking the journey of Torah with me. I'll share this source sheet in the email. Again, like the garment, we're just opening a little bit and closing, opening and closing. You see, just as much as you see what's there, you also see what's being hidden. And again, I meant it when we say you find more of yourself in it. In the last class in this series, we'll be looking at what is the Kabbalistic significance of the human being. Like, what does it mean to be a human being? What is our place in all of this? What is special about what it means that God chose the human to be God's sign, God's image in this world? I'm going to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to stop sharing, but before we hang up, we're just going to tell you about what else is going on. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your wonderful contributions. We have Thursday, we'll be looking at a radical reinterpretation of Hanukkah as related to the winter solstice, and one of the most interesting and challenging Gemaras in Avodah Zarah. Keep your eyes peeled also, like, we've been going really into Kabbalah, and now I'm my own litfish self, as Lauren put it, is itching. I want to do like a real Gemara class too, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So that's Thursday at 7. Saturday night we'll be doing Havdalah, probably around 5:35. And we also do a little bit of singing too. We've been learning some songs associated with the Malava Malka. And keep your eyes peeled on Sunday for the next bonus thing. If you have more questions, I see there's so much in the chat. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for contributing and making this such a special learning community and experience. Katerina, your question of what is Torah, then you wonder, is not at all you being silly. It is exactly you getting it. Torah as mystery. Every class, I want you delighted and frustrated. If that's what's happening, it means that you're getting it. There's so much more there. Thank you all so much. Please feel free to say goodnight. And I hope frustrated in a good way. I hope that's what you mean. There's so much more to do. So much more to do. Thank you all for coming. God willing, see you Thursday, 7 o'clock. Friday, please feel free to drop me a line. Have a l'chaim before Shabbos. Havdalah 5:35 most likely. Motzei Shabbos. Have a great night.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank
This
you.
actually gives me goosebumps.
Bye.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.